Hello, this is Julian with Coffee Reviews, and today we'll be reviewing the Nestor Lasso Wash Process Colombia from Manhattan Coffee Roasters. And there's the bag right there. And Manhattan, based out of Rotterdam, Netherlands. And this is our May 2023 Coffee of the Month, as it was voted on by you guys as the coffee you most wanted to see us review. And I'll be completely honest, I definitely wanted this coffee to win that poll for one big reason, and that's because this is the first Típica Mejorado coffee I've seen that's not of Ecuadorian origin, and it's no secret that we've been trying to review as much of that variety as we can. So I probably would have purchased this coffee even if it hadn't won that poll, but I'm happy it did because it might prompt a lot of you to try this coffee as well. So I'm definitely looking forward to discussing this one, as this right here is day 38. And recipe we went with for this coffee was a 16:1 water to coffee ratio, brewed at 99 degrees Celsius, about 210 degrees Fahrenheit. And I like this one best through the Chemex, which indicates a more medium grind. Roast profile for this coffee, Manhattan is notorious for roasting pretty light, and I can definitely say that this one's on the very light side of that spectrum. It's not necessarily the lightest coffee I've ever had from Manhattan, as we've had some truly light ones, but this one still, by most standards and metrics, is going to be on the pretty light side of things. With that out of the way, let's go ahead and start discussing this coffee. Day 15, first impression, and the coffee was surprisingly well in line with the listed notes that they had on here, as there was far more of a sweeter red profiled cup than the previous experiences with other Mejorado coffees. It's very sweet. That wasn't surprising in any sense, and that's one of the main reasons I'm a big fan of this variety in general. Blatant and obvious in terms of the raspberry profile, as it left a very nice first impression. Day 18, ran it through the Chemex, and once again, the coffee has an extremely well-defined raspberry profile to it on this day once again as well, to the extent that few coffees have actually reached. There are very few coffees I can say that once you try it for the first time, you say, wow, this is exactly what it tastes like. There is no two ways about it. It is very well-defined. Plenty of a pastry quality to the cup, as well as, for me, it felt like a raspberry Danish, as blatant and as clear as possible as a coffee can feel. Slightly candied as well, so for the most part, these first couple of impressions have been extremely positive because the coffee has just been really easy to work with. Day 21, ran it through the April dripper, and the coffee continues to offer an extremely sweet red fruit forward profile with much more of a candied red fruit on the forefront of this day, with a slight pastried graininess reminiscent of a raspberry Danish, and I would even say raspberry jello. So this, once again, was a very nice day, and once again, pretty consistent, even with some significant adjustments. Anytime I brew it with the April, it goes down to a 15:1 at 95 degrees Celsius. Still a very nice and sweet cup of coffee. Day 24, brewed it with our Manhattan recipe, so that's of course upping the temperatures and then going a little bit more fine on the grind, and once again it has a very strong focus on a well-defined raspberry sweetness. The adjustments do bring out a slight bit more brightness to the cup, as well as this very slight citric aspect, but for the most part it continues to remain extremely berry forward. Day 27, same adjustments with the Chemex, and this was the most impressive experience I had of the coffee up to this point, as it is a bit light, and that's something that I did insinuate when discussing the roast profile, but there was plenty of berry sweetness on the back end. It opens up in the direction of that red fruit, as well as much more of the florality now with this adjustment as the cup does cool down, but more overall brightness with plenty of that definition in terms of that raspberry aspect. Day 30, back through the V60, and I settled on the Chemex from this point going forward, as the extremely well-articulated raspberry aspect was not quite as prominent with this brew method and the slight adjustments that we had made, as it does continue to offer some tremendous sweetness, but there are some additional aspects, including that candied aspect, and what I would say was a slight, somewhat M&M's-like taste to this cup, with the pastry aspect still being present, so still reminding me of that raspberry Danish, but maybe offering not quite that same articulated, well-defined clarity that I was experiencing from the Chemex, which just kind of seemed to push it a little bit more over the top. Day 33, another Chemex day, another great day for the coffee, as it continues to remain exceptionally well-defined with more of that raspberry forward-like aspect to it. The best it's been up to this point, cleanest, most vibrant, and it continues to improve, so yet another wonderful day for me. And then day 35, a lot of the same as from day 33, as it continues to offer immense clarity, skewing in the raspberry pastry, raspberry Danish direction with a little bit more brightness to the cup. Candied aspect, similar notes, still a lot of consistency with those adjustments. This coffee has remained consistent, but completely honest, this coffee has been consistent right from the start, as it does skew very heavy in that one direction with that sort of profile that it does offer. And of course being that very articulated raspberry component to this cup. All right, let's go ahead and put up the tasting wheel so you can see what we're getting. And we have 3 level 5s, so let's go through those real quick. And we'll actually start with the sweetness level 5, because this is the one that I kind of waffled back and forth on. And being completely honest, I got to the point, I usually start the tasting wheel either on the body or on the cleanliness, but I actually got all the way to the florality. So I went to cleanliness, finish, sweetness, acidity, and florality. And I thought to myself, I should probably go back and adjust that sweetness, because originally I put it at the level 4, but I did bump it up to level 5 because it is a very, very sweet cup of coffee. And I knew when I put it at that level 4, I'm like, this is definitely on the higher side of level 4, but I think when kind of thinking back to a lot of coffees that I do score at that level 4, this one's definitely sweeter than them. So I will say lower side of level 5, mostly because it's not overbearing, it's not over the top. It's a wonderful sweetness that's present within this one, not to the extent where it's just completely dominating everything else within this cup. It just seems to match the other things within it very nicely. So level 5 there. And what I'm referencing, of course, is going to be that berry at level 5 right there, because the raspberry aspect, it's like the first thing you taste within this coffee, and it's something that's so ever present and consistent for the entirety of the time you're drinking it. And as I've kind of mentioned, there are few to no coffees I've ever had that have had that same sort of very strong raspberry definition to the cup. All right, apologies for the background noise. Cleanliness, level 5. Yes, and that one right there is another one that I said, okay, I very rarely put any coffee right there at that level 5 mark, but why did this one achieve that level 5? And that's of course going to be because of just how strong of a definition there was within this coffee. This one right here, it's very blatant. I said that's one of the first notes I had, was just how blatant that raspberry aspect is within this coffee. The other things you're picking up, they're also pretty clean and well defined. This coffee was clean right from the onset, so that's another really nice positive I have. There are extremely few coffees, especially coffees that aren't even geishas, and not even all geishas score level 5 in terms of the clarity. So that's a massive testament to this coffee scoring level 3s in level 5s in all 3 of those marks. All right, then we have a handful of level 4s. We'll start with the finish level 4. As I kind of mentioned, this coffee by no means is overbearing in any sense, and I think it's because it is a wash processed coffee. So it is cleaner right from the beginning anyway. So it is there at that level 4. Don't have too much to say on that any further. Acidity, level 4. As I also mentioned, it's a pretty light cup of coffee. It does offer a fair bit of brightness to it as well. But as I always say, as long as the sweetness is equal to or above the acidity, then I don't typically mind. So I'm happy with that being there at that level 4 mark. Florality, level 4. Yes, that's something that, if I'm being completely honest, was maybe a little bit more subtle, in the sense that I expected to maybe get a little bit more of that rosy aspect that they have listed on here. But given just how dominant and well-defined that raspberry aspect was within this one, then I think it was present, but it could kind of be mixed in terms of that kind of red profile that was present within this coffee from the start. I was experiencing a very slight herbal aspect, which I could kind of attribute to that floral component, but there at that level 4, I feel like it was present enough to justify it, given just how much of a red component was present within this coffee. Then we have a couple of level 3s. Yeah, we'll start with the citrus fruit, level 3. Yes, I did mention that there was a very slight citric aspect to this coffee. I think one of the main reasons that the florality as well as the citrus scored level 3 and 4 respectively is because the component that was present, that raspberry, was so strong, so well defined, that the other things you were picking up were kind of relative to that. And given that that was on the very high side of the level 5, then the florality maybe lower side of level 3, and even that florality lower side of the level 4, citrus right there in that level 3 mark. So I feel like that's kind of a good place to put it. There was enough citrus to kind of justify that for me. And then the last level 3 is that caramel level 3. That, of course, is going to insinuate that candied aspect that was present within this one. That's why I have theories that this one might have been roasted with the Probat, but I could also be wrong because the clarity was very high, so it could have been roasted with the Typhoon, and honestly, I don't know which roasting machine this coffee used, but it could go either way on that. Nonetheless, it scored very well in that candied aspect, so very happy with that caramel being there at the level 3. Last thing worth discussing is the body at the level 2. That's going to be attributed to the fact that this one was brewed with the Chemex. This tasting wheel was made with the Chemex, so it does have a slightly lighter body. Even then, I do kind of expect that the only adjustment I would make on this tasting wheel would be actually putting the coffee at level 3 for body if it had been made with the V60. And I don't think it actually could have justified the level 5 in terms of cleanliness with the V60. And that's probably the big reason I settled on the Chemex, was that just gave it enough of an edge to push it all the way up there to that level 5 in terms of that cleanliness, that clarity. So yeah, I think that this is actually a pretty good representation of what I was getting from this coffee. All right, so my overall thoughts and impressions of this coffee is very positive, and I don't think that comes as a surprise because it did score very high in the 4 big categories that I'm looking for, and of course being clarity, sweetness, florality, and fruitiness. So it did have all 4 of those things in pretty significant, prominent abundance. I went into this coffee with some very high expectations, and this one actually did exceed those expectations ever so slightly, making it my favorite Manhattan coffee that we've reviewed this year, and one of the more enjoyable Colombian coffees I've reviewed this entire year, which is saying something because Colombia has actually had a very good year for me. I've reviewed some really impressive Colombian coffees, so I don't know where this coffee is actually going to finish. As of right now, it would be in my top 10 coffees of the year list, but given just how well the Colombian coffees are doing, I'm not entirely sure where it might place. And I would really have to think how it compares to some of the other really positive Colombian coffees I've had, including the Jose Salazar that we've reviewed and the Faberninco from Flower Child. There's been some really nice Colombian coffees in general, but yeah, this one right here, it lived up to the Mejorado expectations. Great sweetness and some really nice clarity and fruit aspects to go alongside of that. Type of person I would suggest this coffee to. If you've been enjoying the Mejorado coffees, then this is one that I feel like you shouldn't miss, because this one is also on the slightly cheaper side of things, because this one, I think it goes into their rare category, so it's not quite as expensive as a lot of other Mejorado coffees. Even then, you're still getting some wonderful things. Of course, I'm going to mention that sweetness, but I've heard a lot of people come back to me and say, wow, this coffee really just tastes like raspberries. And I'm like, yes, it does. So if you really like raspberries, and that's another direction I'd point somebody towards. And your washed coffees, of course, offering great clarity without sacrificing any vibrancy, because this one had wonderful vibrancy as well. But for the most part, I think that's the best way I can leave this review. If you by chance had an opportunity to try this coffee, I'd love to know your thoughts and impressions of it as well. If you're enjoying the content, give this video a like, subscribe if you're not already subscribed. And this right here has been a review of the Nestor Lasso Wash Process Colombia from Manhattan Coffee Roasters. Thank you for watching.